Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Today, February 28, marks the 6th anniversary of the Hanoi Summit, a pivotal moment in U.S. North Korea diplomacy, which, however, ended without an agreement. Since Hanoi, North Korea has expanded its nuclear and missile capabilities while strengthening ties with China and Russia. Now, with President Trump back in office, questions have risen about the potential resumption of negotiations and any shift in U.S. policy towards Pyongyang. Trump's return has renewed debate over his new approach on whether he would pursue diplomacy or a harder stance. For a closer analysis of the issue, we connect to Randall Schriver, chairman of the Project 2049 Institute, who was the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs during the Hanoi Summit. Welcome to the program, Mr. Schriver.
Thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So let's begin right away. Today, like I said, marks the 6th anniversary of the Hanoi Summit between the U.S. and North Korea. As the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, you played a key role in Washington-Pyongyang negotiations at that time. Could you tell us, how do you look back on that period? What are your reflections?
Well, it was unprecedented diplomacy, and that gave us a degree of optimism that we were trying something new and engaging at the leader level. But by the time Hanoi rolled around, we had done enough negotiations at the working level and even at the Secretary of State level where we didn't find that the North Koreans were moving fast enough, far enough to have a quality of agreement at Hanoi. So in a way, the Hanoi summit itself was not unexpected that there was an agreement. It was really President Trump trying to pull something out at the last moment, despite the fact that the negotiating teams hadn't made much progress. And of course, we know the result of that now.
Right, but even so, regardless of the results, it was indeed a pivotal moment shaping the trajectory of the relationship between the U.S. and North Korea. Now, with President Trump back in office, there's growing speculation about whether the U.S.-North Korea dialogue could resume this time around. How has Trump's perception of North Korea evolved since the previous negotiations? And I also want to ask, how has North Korea's strategic position changed over the course of 6 years?
Well, I think President Trump was disappointed that there wasn't an agreement in Hanoi. He feels like he put together a very good offer and was earnest in everything he said about working with North Korea on economic assistance, on sanctions relief. Had North Korea come through on their part of the deal with meaningful steps toward denuclearization. I think in the subsequent period, as you rightfully point out, North Korea has continued to make progress on its strategic systems, now has a very close relationship with Russia, really made stronger by the fact that North Korea is committing troops to the front in Ukraine. And so there are some new dynamics that we would have to take into account should dialogue be resumed. I do think President Trump at some point will want to have that dialogue. He believes he has a good relationship with Kim Jong-un, and he believes he can leverage that relationship to better the security environment on the Korean Peninsula and in the region.
Right. So regarding Trump's willingness to speak with North Korea, in the initial stages of his administration, people had been expecting North Korea issue to be a lower priority for President Trump. But now he's been expressing strong willingness to re-engage diplomacy with North Korea. What do you believe is driving Trump's renewed interest in the regime?
Well, I think he's always had an interest since his first engagement with Kim Jong-un in Singapore. And I think that didn't go away. He obviously has a busy agenda to tend to, though, not only internationally, where he's working on the Ukraine conflict and has his team working on that, working on issues in our own hemisphere, working on economic and trade issues. But a pretty significant agenda domestically, too, trying to reform the federal government and reel in spending and reduce the size of our government. So the thought that he might not engage with North Korea on the front end of administration probably had more to do with things crowding that out rather than his lack of interest. I think he's always had the interest in resuming that relationship with Kim Jong-un and North Korea.
Right. So with this renewed interest, lately the Trump administration has reaffirmed that a complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization is still its primary objective. But some people still speculate that future negotiations might focus on a so-called small deal, such as freezing North Korea's nuclear capabilities in exchange for removing threats to the U.S. or a lifting of sanctions. What's your assessment on such kind of possibilities?
Well, in the long history of U.S. North Korea diplomacy, usually alongside South Korea, our great ally, we've tried many formulations. We've tried many approaches, trying a small deal, trying incremental, step-by-step approaches. So at the end of the day, North Korea has to want to engage in a meaningful way and include denuclearization as part of that. I am skeptical that they will. And what I think will happen is the conversation will likely broaden. I don't think President Trump or the administration will drop the goal of so-called CVID, but I think there may be an interest in broadening the discussion to talk about other issues. We've already seen North Korea as a belligerent in Ukraine, for example, and President Trump is working to end that conflict. So there's a topic that they could discuss that goes well beyond the nuclear issue. So I suspect when things resume, CVID will remain the core, but I think there will be a broader agenda.
Right. So with given the changed geopolitical landscape, what kind of conditions do you believe must be met for the U.S. and North Korea talks to resume? And do you anticipate a return to the top-down approach as seen in the past negotiations?
Well, I don't know that there will be a lot of preconditions, as there weren't many in the first term, quite frankly. We tried to negotiate at the working level before President Trump and Kim met in Singapore and then again Hanoi. The fact of the matter is their negotiators were not really empowered to do trade-offs and make deals. So it really requires the top leader on their side to make any decisions, no matter how seemingly inconsequential, insignificant. So I do think there will be some top-down work in order to try to get movement on the issues that we care about. The bureaucrats will always have a role in implementation and follow-up and maybe even generating ideas. But I think because of their system, where only one person truly matters, and our system, where one person is pretty darn important, I think we'll see a top-down approach once again, as we did the first time.
Right. And what about the conditions to be met for talks to resume? Do you have ideas on this?
Well, as I said, I don't think there will be much. We didn't really have them in the first term. You'll recall President Trump agreed to meet Kim Jong-un basically without precondition the first term. We then sat down to negotiate an agreement after he had already agreed to a meeting. So there may not be much. He might feel confident enough in his relationship with Kim Jong-un. And look, the fact of the matter is our great ally in South Korea is experiencing a bit of domestic political turmoil. And so ideally, we would spend a lot of time working through our strategy and our approach with Seoul and perhaps with other allies. But that might prove to be a little difficult in the current environment. So I suspect that President Trump would be prepared to move forward without a lot of preconditions.
Right. So we'll have to see how President Trump would make a decision. But meanwhile, Trump has initiated negotiations with Russia to end the war in Ukraine now. How would you think this diplomatic engagement with Russia now and efforts to improve U.S.-Russia ties might influence prospects for U.S. North Korea talks?
Well, North Korea is a belligerent and a direct contributor to the Russian war effort in Ukraine. I think that's an irritant in the relationship. As President Trump and his team work to end that conflict in Ukraine, I suppose that potentially removes a irritant in our relationship with North Korea as well. But I do think the details will matter in any kind of attempt to resolve Ukraine. Right now, I do have concerns about how much the U.S. side seems to be willing to come the direction of Russia and the interest that Russia has. A very favorable agreement for Russia would presumably give North Korea a fair amount of confidence that they can hold out for a better deal for their interests as well.
Right. So we'll have to see how the situation unfolds on that. Now, as for Korea's perspective, South Korea's perspective, there have been growing concerns about South Korea passing in U.S. North Korea negotiations, of course. You've previously emphasized the importance of close coordination with South Korea in these talks. And in light of such concerns, what kind of steps should South Korea take to ensure that it has a role in the process?
Well, I think good communications in both directions is essential. And I've said, I think both sides could have done better in the first Trump administration and in the Moon Jae-in presidency. Oftentimes, we were negotiating with North Korea directly in parallel without full consultation and full visibility in one another's approaches, and we had proposals forwarded from both the United States to North Korea as well as South Korea to North Korea without a lot of visibility beforehand. So I think we can do better, and we really should do better. I think what South Korea can do to improve its position is, first of all, hopefully sort through the political process to determine who's going to be the leader and bring back a degree of stability in the government in the Republic of Korea. Accomplishing that, I think, being a trusted and reliable partner to the United States and vice versa. But you asked what Seoul can do. I think contributing in all the different ways that South Korea traditionally has done, but also looking at issues like shipbuilding and ship support to the United States Navy. These are things that will strengthen the relationship overall and ultimately give South Korea the voice that I know that it wants as we prepare for negotiations with North Korea.
Right, so better communications and more interaction with the U.S. That seems to be very important coming from an insider's perspective. Now, alongside this, trilateral security cooperation between the U.S., South Korea, and Japan has been crucial in addressing North Korea's nuclear threats. But there are expectations that the Trump second administration may not maintain the same level of trilateral coordination as the Biden administration did. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are compelled to work together because of the threats that they face, the common threats, the security environment. So North Korea, China, Russia, they all drive us closer together. The question, I think, is, will President Trump invest personally in a trilateral relationship? Will he mirror the kinds of things that President Biden did in hosting the trilateral meeting at Camp David, which resulted in the spirit of Camp David? I don't know if he will, but I do think his team will maintain the trilateral relationship. That was true during the first Trump administration. I never attended a multilateral defense meeting without my defense secretary meeting with South Korean and Japanese counterparts in a trilateral setting on the side. That's true of every Shangri-La dialogue, ASEAN defense minister meeting plus dialogue. So it's been a feature of our relationship for quite some time. It was really President Biden that brought it to the leader level alongside a very courageous President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishida. Even if it doesn't have that same investment at the leader level, I think the important thing is the practical work continues, particularly on the defense issues such as missile defense, anti-submarine warfare, and the like. And I'm confident it will.
Mm-hmm. So trilateral cooperation indeed has been a key pillar in countering North Korea's threats, and we'll have to see, but any shift would have a significant regional impact. Now, shifting gears, as prospects for renewed defense cost negotiations are looming, Trump even had referred to South Korea as a money machine. South Korea faces a challenge of balancing alliance stability with its national interests. How do you see this issue, and what strategies should South Korea consider in managing these talks?
I think South Korea brings a great deal to the table when it comes to our alliance relationship, and I think just being able to articulate that in a comprehensive way is important. South Korea already spends a significant amount of money on its defense budgets as a percentage of GDP. I believe it's second or third, maybe third in the world among democracies behind Poland and Israel. So I think that's a good story, but also the host nation support has been, in my view, generous, even though the president at times have questioned whether it's generous enough. But I think it's a very defensible and generous amount. But beyond that, finding those new areas of cooperation, I think if South Korea is able to demonstrate a solid partnership on shipbuilding and ship maintenance and repair, that's a new wrinkle that will directly help the United States. We simply lack the capacity to surge and build the Navy that we need for the current security environment. And certainly while we're deployed, it's extremely costly and difficult to bring ships back to ports in the United States to conduct the maintenance and repair. If South Korea can step in and help us with that, that'll be hugely valuable, and I think that would be recognized by everyone, including the president himself. He's mentioned it in phone calls to South Korean leaders. So I think adding that kind of new wrinkle would really position South Korea well, so that it is also in the position to ask the United States for what it needs.
Right, so strengthening areas of cooperation, especially in the shipbuilding industry, would be helpful. Now, Mr. Schriver, before we let you go, could you leave us with an advice regarding South Korea's diplomatic strategy in navigating its relationship with the United States under the second Trump administration?
Well, I don't think South Korean leaders necessarily need advice. I think what they need to do is really tell their story in a compelling way, because again, as I said, it's a very good story. They spend a considerable amount on defense. They've been a trusted ally, including deploying out of area to places like Iraq and Afghanistan alongside U.S. forces when we were experiencing times of need. They're bringing new capabilities to the fore, like the shipbuilding and maintenance and repair, as I mentioned. So there's a very good story there to be told. It just needs to be articulated and made known to people in the United States. South Korea is a major contributor to our economy and a job creator, and all these things just need to be presented in a compelling way. And I'm confident that friends in Congress, people in the administration, the American people will see how valuable this alliance is to us.
Right. So as you've highlighted, South Korea's ability to engage proactively in areas of cooperation, leveraging multilateral partnerships, and assert its strategic value will be more critical than ever. I'm afraid we'll have to leave our discussion right here. Mr. Schriver, we truly appreciate your time and expertise in shedding light on these important issues. Thank you so much again for this insightful conversation.
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.